So now Sudan's conflict escalated further as reports from El Fasher detail mass killings, ethnic targeted violence, and forced displacement carried out by the Rapid Support Forces (RSF). Rights groups and Sudanese officials have labeled it the violence extermination level, urging urgent international intervention. A Swiss NGO has also highlighted how Sudan's gold supply chain, much of which flows through the UAE, continues to fund armed factors, sparking intense debate and criticism across social media. So now, there's many players in this whole game.
Of course.
Yeah.
Governments, NGOs, regional stakeholders, everybody's asking questions. And of course, the buyers and the sellers on the global market in terms of whether this is an opportunity for them to do more business. But then the questions are you going to then support a trade which essentially supports the RSF, or are you going to stick with the recognized government of the day?
From Cairo to Cape Town, Lagos to Lamu. 54 nations, one continent, countless perspectives. I am Waweru Njoroge.
And I'm Njoroge.
Welcome to Panel 54, a global perspective through an African lens. This is the podcast where we unpack power, people, policy, and the paradoxes that define our time. With nuance, with history, and with a deliberate commitment to context. This isn't punditry, it's perspective. It's not a briefing, it's a reframing. And it starts right here. Okay, fair questions. And there's, like I said, this whole thing starts back from 2019.
Yep.
Hemeti had actually set up a company called Al Junaid, which was now mining gold and sending it to the UAE. I know the Russians had been involved at some point. They ended up supporting Al Buhan instead of supporting Dagalo. So that whole, there's been conflicts galore, and apparently there's also been Colombians who have been brought in as mercenaries through the UAE. I remember there's a story about blood diamonds, and this is a similar kind of situation. The thing about gold is that it's fusible, which means it cannot be easily traced.
Right.
But you export to Sharjah, actually, which is exactly where it's going, and then you send arms to the conflict here. So who should we be pointing the finger at?
Well, look, the business of conflict is not cheap. So you have conflict going on, and and it's always resource-based. Usually, it's resource-based conflict. So somebody's fueling it. So perhaps that's who the finger should be pointed at.
And this is something Dr. Hassan Kanenje had actually talked about as well.
Absolutely.
All right, we need to follow this up a bit further.
Take things over to another gold-ish place, but this is kind of different, where Ghana cracks down on illegal gold mining. Chinese miners are arrested and machines have been, seized.
Okay.
So we're looking at Ghanaian authorities intensifying operations against illegal gold mining, called the Galamsey, is what we're talking about now, confiscating equipment, including dredging machines, and arresting several Chinese nationals found mining in areas that had been otherwise protected, talking about issues having to deal with river ecosystems, corruption, and pollution affecting all kinds of things, from thousands of households, prompting renewed nationwide enforcement efforts.
What did you say? Is Galamsey or
Galamsey?
Okay. Because the pronunciation, you pronounce it different. Anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Galamsey, because I'm just thinking. I'm thinking about a lot of the Ghanaian names
right.
where that would just be the pronunciation. It could be something else.
And this has been an issue, time immemorial. Not the pronunciation of the word, but the whole aspect of illegal mining.
Indeed, because then where does it go? So, and again, it's another story where you look at the back end of things. Who is mining it? Where is it going? And who then has the right to say where it should or shouldn't go? Environmental efforts. When you come in and you mine and you leave, what happens to the environment? When you come in and you mine and you leave, who has a say when it comes to protectionist policies for the communities who are living in those areas, which is what the hullabaloo is all about right now? Who's going to protect them? Who's going to protect the environment? Who's going to ensure that they get something? Because this is where
compensation.
Compensation, that's the word, exactly.
So another conversation that we need to have is with the Ghanaian EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. We'll try and see whether we can actually get them on. That would be a very interesting conversation to actually have. We're going to shift gear, but stay within the continent where we're looking at Uganda now. So with Uganda's 2026 general election approaching, political activity is rising sharply. Opposition groups are mobilizing early. Youth political engagement is increasing, and analysts note that the race, though still tilted in favor of the ruling party, is shaping up to be more competitive than previous cycles. Questions around electoral fairness remain central to the campaign narrative, though.
It's the questions already abound in terms of what's going to happen in Uganda. You can make your predictions as to who the announced winner will be.
Okay.
And of course, I choose those words very carefully.
Well done.
But is it going to be a different? Is it going to be a different election and outcome from what has been for the last how many terms?
I think it's going to be the same. Well, it does look a lot more competitive, and the reason why I draw parallels is because I remember seeing a headline that says that what happened in Tanzania was a coronation rather than a contest.
Yeah.
For all intents and purposes, I think the optics are looking good in terms of being able to see that it's free and fair, but it is likely to be another coronation as far as I'm concerned.
Indeed. You just have to ask questions about what's happening to folks who are in the opposition at the moment.
Wait and watch this space. If they can kidnap Kenyans, then we can... I suppose we'll have some coming over to Kenya to seek asylum more than anything else, actually.
Right. Well, it's also kind of interesting story where Kenya was hit by, a wave of government website hacks, what we're being told. More than 40 Kenyan government websites were reportedly hacked and, okay, so I just lost that. Sorry, defaced in a fresh cybersecurity incident, right? The breaches targeted high visibility portals and ministry pages and state agencies, raising concerns about Kenya's cyber readiness. So authorities say investigations, of course, are underway to identify the attackers and secure compromised systems.
I did test some of the sites that had allegedly gone down. Although I think this obviously came out by the time it was hitting the WhatsApp sphere and all that kind of stuff. I think they had managed to arrest it or nip it in the bud. But president.geo.ke or .org was still down.
Right.
The council site was up and running, but they'd just picked it up. And then about maybe 10 minutes later, after I checked president's site, that was up and running as well. But the question then becomes, does this then fall under the Cybercrimes Act?
I don't know. Well, yeah, because, okay, first of all, if you're going to talk about it being an activity with some criminality attached to it, all right, then obviously somebody's doing something that they're not supposed to do. However, they're not hiding in plain sight.
Okay, fair enough.
They're away from you. You don't know who it is who's done this. It's espionage on a certain level. To then gain control of what would be your most protected areas, as it were.
I have a feeling I know where the attack came from.
You do?
Yes.
Pray tell?
No, but I can't say.
Oh, no. All right, then.
It's usually where most attacks tend to come from,
So shall we take a guess? Finger in the air.
Well, I don't know. They have a hammer and a sickle.
All right.
Enough said.
Okay.
Right, and to the final story for the roundup. Nigeria's Super Eagles were eliminated from the FIFA World Cup qualification after a tense match ended 1-1. That went into penalties where DRC Congo secured the win. The result, and they think they won in penalties 4-3. The result triggered national disappointment.
Well, for a second time in a row.
Yes, second time in a row, and renewed scrutiny apparently about the team's strategy, coaching decisions, and player selections.
We've got asked those questions all the time, one of the giants of football on the continent, without a doubt. But then this is where strategy disappoints skill.
Okay.
Over and over again. What are you doing to make sure that the boys are ready to go? It's got to be one of those.
Two World Cup sessions in a row. Something must have been learned from the first round.
There's a proverb from Guinea which says that there is no pain in the journey that comes from preparation.
Okay.
So I mean, it's maybe something the Guineans were aware of in the preparation too. It's not just boys on the pitch. It's are you putting your money behind it? Are you putting your motivation behind it? What kind of allegiance do they bear to the nation?
I suppose.
What reason are you giving them for?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But does it have to be incentivized? Surely, the pride for playing for your country at the World Cup.
Yeah, one would imagine. But you think about it, man. If you're going in for camp and you have to look for allowances, and you're going in for camp, and you're not quite sure what's going to happen to folks you may have left behind. It's
So
a big deal.
You're playing with a very demotivated kind of. You're coming in with a very demotivated kind of attitude.
Either that, or we just don't take it seriously enough to realize what countries are doing. I mean, look at what some countries are doing in terms of their sportsmen and women. They realize that this is a big ticket earner.
And their academies and stuff like that. But Nigeria's got some decent academies for up and coming young players.
That could be a thing that we actually talk about, because how seriously we take sports and what it can actually do for country is what far outweighs what we imagine. And perhaps that's something
Sports diplomacy.
we need to discuss.
Okay.
I agree.
All right. Well, that's it for the roundup. Time to get on with our show for today.
In West Africa, illegal mining has escalated into an environmental and political crisis, and Chinese companies are at the heart of it. But this isn't just a story about foreign influence, it's about local collaboration, the future of governance, and the costs of resource exploitation that Africa is paying today.
Seth Bokpe, one of Ghana's respected investigative journalists, has spent years exposing how these mining operations are polluting the land, fueling corruption, and feeding instability. Today, we dig into the complex role that foreign mining interests, local politics, and environmental degradation are playing in reshaping West Africa's future.
So we ask, how do you navigate the grey area between foreign investment and exploitation? And is the real problem the foreign investors or the local governments and businesses enabling these operations?
Seth, I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you so much for joining us on panel 54, all the way from Accra, by the way. And thank you for making the time. We've got a lot to unpack right now, so I'm going to jump straight into it, if that's okay with you. We're talking about the fact that Ghana's gold is very rich. I mean, they have a lot of rich lands, which has obviously attracted a lot of foreign investors. But more so in recent years, it seems like China's involvement has begun to get more involved and has probably brought a lot more new risks. Now, according to the World Bank, nearly 70% of all gold mined in Ghana is now extracted illegally. You have actually covered illegal mining in Ghana for years now. In your view, did China take advantage of an already broken system, or did they help create the scale of this crisis?
That's a very interesting question. I think that it's both ways. I mean, the system is already broken because you have a situation where small-scale miners struggle to get their licenses because of bureaucracy. So in the past, you have people dying in mining pits. I mean, they dig down into the ground, particularly in closer to where you have these large-scale mining companies. What has happened now is that there are a lot more technology available, obviously influenced by the Chinese. So they have brought in some crude technology they call champagnes. They put this on our rivers to extract gold. They also finance excavators, which used not to be part of the mining ecology in the past. So now you have excavators that are digging deeper into farmlands, into forest reserves. And then also you have a situation where the security services have virtually closed their eyes to what is happening. Because an excavator is quite a huge equipment.
Yeah.
An moving equipment. If it moves through a community, through a district, where the district chief executive or the local mayor is the head of security, and yet nobody sees it, then you notice that there's a broken system where the Chinese are taking advantage of.
Nobody sees it, Seth, or nobody agrees that they've seen it?
It's a complicated thing. The Chinese are actually taking advantage of a broken system where our security services have gone to sleep and allowing, the Chinese to mine with impunity.
As we're looking at what you've said, where security forces sometimes will try to ignore or fall asleep, like you've said, the question then is that what makes West Africa particularly vulnerable to these kinds of foreign mining operations, where it would appear as though you can come in and do whatever you want? Is it governance? Is it that there's a promise of development or a combination of the two?
I think it's mainly a question of governance. Our regulatory systems are virtually in coma, and people walk in and do what they like. So, for instance, if you take our forest reserves, where there are about four regions in Ghana where a core of our mining reserves are. If you take the Ashanti region, Central, Western, and Western North regions, it is very easy for a Chinese man to walk into a forest reserve. Obviously, the Chinese don't know where is the Western region, aided by a Ghanaian. Right? The Ghanaians aid them through our porous borders. I know, for instance, that there are a lot of Chinese who are deported when they are arrested in Ghana, and they come through Cote d'Ivoire. They simply and plain they board in Cote d'Ivoire and walk through our borders and enter a forest reserve. Because those reserves are not well, the forest guards that are protecting them are not well resourced. These are Chinese gangs with their Ghanaian collaborators who are carrying sophisticated weapons. I'm telling you, top grade weapons. And you have a Ghanaian forest guard who is not well equipped to fight back. So as we speak, about 44 of our forest reserves have been destroyed by these illegal mines. That is one. Two, I also think that there is our economic systems have actually made us vulnerable for manipulation. You have a situation where in 2018, our senior minister, that was the first time we created that position for anyone, was against the prosecution of a Chinese woman who was arrested for destroying forest reserves. This woman was doing a lot of damage. She was arrested, she was being prosecuted, then suddenly she disappeared. And then when we found out later, we were told that she was deported to China because what is the essence of prosecuting somebody whose country is supporting us? So we've virtually sold our birthright on a plate of our economy not doing well. We owe China a lot. I think we are the 10th in Africa, owing China so much. So in order not to, stir any controversy or trouble with the Chinese government, we just decided that when we arrest the Chinese, we just deport them instead of prosecuting.
Instead of prosecution. That's interesting because you speak about...
Let me explain this as well.
Yeah.
So in 2021, I did a story just to find out how many people in our prisons were jailed because of illegal mining. And I also sought to find out what were their nationalities. So the data came, and about 220 people were jailed for illegal mining. Guess what? Only 2 people in our prisons at the time were Chinese. And the prison administration could not even tell us what their crime were. So what we are basically doing is that we arrest them in their numbers, because there is no week in Ghana when a Chinese illegal miner is not arrested. So we arrest them and deport them.
Frequently.
That's basically what we do. Yeah.
So even when you talk about this and you talk about, destruction of forests and things like that, rivers are poisoned with mercury. Entire forests are cleared for mining operations. The environment toll is staggering. Just looking at a report, 2024, the Ghana Environmental Protection Agency found that illegal mining has caused over 40% of the country's deforestation. We're looking at real situations here. Has the damage reached a point of no return, or is there still room to recover these ecosystems?
I think the damage is massive, It's really massive. If you look at some of the reports, the size of the damage is about, I did a little bit of a calculation before joining you. We are looking at land the size of Gambia.
Okay.
Land the size of the Gambia destroyed, land the size of Seychelles destroyed in some of the regions. Yes, it is extensive, but then the recovery can be done. But that recovery will cost us billions of dollars. I'm saying that it can be done because there are a few occasions that our security services have had a major crackdown on illegal mining, and you begin to see that the rivers are cleared up, looking blue again. Yes. But for the lands, it will take quite a while. I mean, you've destroyed the topsoil. You have to do a bit of recovery, closing if you go to those Galamsey areas, the trenches filled with water. I mean, it's pathetic.
What about the people? What about the people who've been affected? The communities who've lost food sources and things like that. Do you have any stories or anything that you've covered yourself personally that talks to how much damage that's been done?
Yes, there was a community, for instance, in the eastern region, where our former president Nana Akufo-Addo comes from. I mean, it's one of the badly damaged regions. You would have thought that having come from that region, he will actually protect the place. Even in his own constituency where he votes, the damage is as terrible as anything else. So there was this community we visited where a fake one, we will later find out it's a fake mining company, entered an agreement with an old lady that they will build a 3-bedroom house for her if she can give a farmland for mining. We are told the local chief was involved. The woman agreed. And then they did their mining, destroyed the farmland. And guess what she got in return? 100 bags of cement.
Okay.
Wow.
She could not trace the mining company again. The only thing she has to show that she ever had any engagement with this mining company was a phone number. So we use this phone number to track the person. We got a name, the name of a business. We went to check from our registrar of companies and found that that company is actually into imports and exports. It has nothing to do with mining. And yet this vulnerable woman, old woman who is in her 80s, lost her farmland and lost her house as well because they broke the house down and were digging a foundation to build. That story really touched me. Really, really touched me.
So I suppose that speaks then to the aspect of where's the governance, where's the impunity, where's the governance, where's the compliance, and then also touches on the fact there's, as you said at the beginning, there's an aspect of complicity as well. But you've done a lot of reports on corruption, and it's not necessarily about bad actors from abroad. I want to now internalize this conversation. You've exposed politicians and businesses, like you just said, and political and business elites who have knowingly profited from illegal mining. I think you did a report in 2023, an investigative piece in 2023 actually, that revealed that local politicians and business people are often the main enablers of what's going on. So the question becomes this: do we call this an issue of governance failure in Africa as a whole, or is it a more deliberate case of blatant corruption with local collaborators who are basically turning a blind eye to harm?
I agree with you. It is both, I think, because the story you are referring to. So our government, let me start from here. In 2016, our government decided that the Mahama administration decided that we needed to eliminate mining in our forest reserves by 2035. And then we should be able to halve the mining in our forest reserve by 50% by 2025. Guess what? In 2022, the government at the time, the Akufo-Addo administration, passed a law meant to regulate mining in the forest reserves. But that law actually became an incentive for political actors, mainly from his party and then friends of his administration, people who were close to his administration, to get mining leases in our forest reserves. I mean, I'm talking about some of the prized forest reserves, including globally significant biodiversity areas that are protected by international conventions.
Yeah.
They actually gave them mining leases. There was one man who is now an MP. He has actually sued us. We meet him in court. Who was the front man. He was connected to 15 companies. His company was actually doing the consultancy for these mining companies.
Yeah.
15 of them, including a Chinese company. Now, what the law says in Ghana is that if you register as a mining service provider for mining companies, you cannot own a mining lease.
Okay.
But this company I'm referring to was giving a mining lease. Not one, not two. Not one, not two. And this guy wrote on his website that he's an MP now. I mean, and the funny thing is that we are expected to call them honorable.
Of course, honorable. This is interesting that you say this, because I liken it to a time where complicity also ruled the day. That when, again, interesting that we're here in Ghana, is that when the slave trade happened, there were local collaborators. Local collaborators were on the ground to allow the movement of persons from the continent outside. So many years later, we are seeing the same thing. That are we saying also that there are local collaborators that are aiding to facilitate foreign mining operations in Ghana, in other parts?
Absolutely. From the regulator to the chiefs and so on, they are all involved. As I said, it is very difficult for a Chinese man to know where the forest reserves are and where our mining deposits are, unless, of course, he or she has a local collaborator who leads him or her there. And that is exactly what we've been doing. If you look at the arrests that have been made over the years, it is not only the Chinese who are arrested at the sites, there are Ghanaians who are arrested as well. Every single mining arrest that have been done by law enforcement over the years involve Chinese and Ghanaians. And in most of these occasions, you will find more Ghanaians at the sites than the Chinese.
Okay.
It's interesting because recent reports have also linked illegal mining to organized crime and even terrorism, as serious as that. In 2024, the UNODC's report on West Africa highlighted how criminal syndicates profit from the chaos caused by illegal mining. We see that happening. So how real is the link between illegal mining and rising instability in places like Zamfara and the Sahel?
It's really serious. I mean, it is not far-fetched. If you look at the Liberian and Sierra Leone war, for instance, it was fueled by diamonds, right?
Yes.
And those diamond mines were captured by rebels. It is what they use in buying their arms. It is what they use in financing their lifestyle and so on. So across West Africa, the Zamfara area, as you mentioned, where Boko Haram and so on, there are these bandits who seize mines or simply go to those places and charge taxes. If you're a local miner, you would have to pay taxes to them because law enforcement doesn't go there. Even in Ghana, where you have these illegal mining sites, law enforcement doesn't go. These guys have been able to infiltrate our law enforcement in such a way that even before the police or the military turn up, they have been informed, so they will escape. So there are millions of cedis, dollars, naira, whichever currency you name it, trickling into the hands of these bandits and terrorist groups through mining. It is absolutely true. It is true.
Okay,
And
so
unfortunately, I dare say our intelligence services have failed us because there's no way they can say they don't know what is going on. And a few months ago, when this administration came to power fresh, I think about in April or May, they went into a forest reserve that had a whole community, more than 10,000 people
living
in there.
Wow.
Yes, living there. They managed to flash them out. How did these guys manage to live there for 8 years or more without the security services knowing about it? And we are talking about a situation where we spent money on drones to fight illegal mining. Drones.
Interesting.
So how did these drones miss these people? I mean, we are not talking about ants. We are talking about human beings who are in forest reserves that have been damaged, virtually plummeted. So you are seeing bare land. If you fly a drone on a bare land, you see people.
You would.
Yeah.
How did you miss it?
So just on some very quickly, a yes or no answer based on what you said that we cannot use local law enforcement to actually try and take care of the crime. Yes or no? Do ECOWAS and AU have the ability or even the coordination to be able to confront this issue at all? I think that I'll take your answer. I think I know your answer.
No.
Okay, that's fine. So I'm going to come back to the issue of the role and responsibility or accountability basically of China, because China has long insisted that as a country, they have said we cannot control the activities of private companies operating abroad. That's what they're saying. But with billions that is basically flowing into African mining, can Beijing really claim to be hands-off, right? Should African governments be holding Chinese companies accountable, first of all, especially for the environmental damage that's been done and illegal operations, even at the risk of then basically straining diplomatic relations?
I think we need to have a serious conversation with the Chinese. I am saying this against the backdrop of what I saw in China when I visited there in 2019. The Chinese government takes environmental protection very serious.
Okay.
Very serious. There was a time we left our hotel in the morning, came back in the evening. When we left, there was a place that was very bare. In the evening, there were trees.
Okay.
Oh, yes. They take tree planting and environmental protection that serious.
Wow.
If you have a situation where millions, maybe I'm exaggerating, thousands of your citizens are involved in illegal mining and are deported every now and then. I mean, if a country deports your citizen, there is a reason they deport them, and it's reported to you. So you cannot say you can't take responsibility for what is happening here. Another thing, if you look at the trade data between Ghana and China, what we have here in Ghana as official exported gold to China is lower compared to what the Chinese have in their books as gold coming from Ghana. Doesn't that say a lot about illicit financial flows?
Yep.
Does that not say a lot about smuggling of gold? If the Chinese government will be sincere to itself, it should be willing to sit down and ask, how do we tackle this in a mutually beneficial way?
Manner, right.
Yeah, we can have your gold, but you can also protect your environment.
Okay.
The sad reality is that we are not interested in having that conversation because of the African proverb that says that if your finger is in somebody's mouth, you don't slap the person.
Well, how's that for good measure? Because China has long insisted that it cannot control the actions of private companies. They can come in if there's a G2G agreement, for example, but of private companies operating abroad, they have no control. But
It is
with
not true.
well, there we go. With
I
billions
think
flowing, we're looking at billions flowing from African mining. Can Beijing really claim to be hands off?
No, I don't think the Chinese government is being sincere when they say they don't know what their private companies do on our continent. Every single Chinese business here has the blessing of the Chinese government. In fact, there is data that shows that they are financed by the Chinese government. If you take companies like China Railway, for instance, most of the things they do here has the blessing of the Chinese administration, the Chinese government. So if you come here, and as I mentioned to you earlier, you have illegal gold coming into your country, and this gold is coming through a company, you should begin to sit down and ask yourself, if we say these are our partners, African countries are our partners, how do we work with them to ensure that we have their gold all right? Because demand for gold is
Exactly.
high. I mean,
Exactly. Yeah.
that is what is actually fueling all this illegal mining. If there was no demand, it won't be happening. So how do we help these people to mine sustainably? Because the Chinese have the technology. There's no doubt about it. How do we help them to mine sustainably in a way that will not harm their environment? In a way that they wouldn't need so much to exist as countries? Because as we speak, food security is going to be a challenge in Ghana in some years to come.
Okay.
Because most of the farming communities have been destroyed. We may be importing water because our water bodies have been destroyed, polluted heavily. Data suggests that if you look at the turbidity levels, they are over 5,000% higher than what the WHO accepts.
5,000%.
More than 5,000% in some areas.
Wow.
It is a very serious situation. As arsenic, mercury, and so on are in high doses in our water bodies. There are communities that kidney disease, mining communities that kidney diseases are going high.
Okay.
So if we take all this into context,
Yes.
the Chinese government would not say our companies are not complicit in all this.
So now to try and bring out that aspect in terms of, so how do you, okay, not so much make them toe the line, but you can use the media as a means to, obviously, as you do, the role of media in the basic fight for the truth. Quick question, ballpark figure, how many times has your life been threatened as an investigative journalist? Ballpark.
So for us, I have been fortunate not to have fallen into that.
Okay.
Because, I mean, before we go to the field, we do risk assessments.
Right.
Is this worth it? If it is not worth it, what are the alternative measures we can take? So, for instance,
yes,
I will use satellite imagery when I know that the groundwork I have done indicates that it's not safe to go into the mines. I won't do that.
Okay.
But there are colleagues. I mean, there's a very famous one, Erastus Asari Donko, who has been attacked on so many occasions.
Okay.
On so many occasions. He was part of he was embedded in the security architecture that was tackling illegal mining between 2017 to 2024. So he knows quite a bit of the forest reserves and occasionally slips in there to see what has happened, what has been happening there. And the stories he brings out have been horrible. And this guy has been attacked on a number of occasions.
Okay, but there's statistically, actually, there's a survey that came out in 2023, apparently. Reporters Without Borders from the West African journalists. Basically, West African journalists are probably among the most threatened globally. But if you've not been threatened per se, I wanted then to ask this question.
For threats, you have verbal.
You have verbal, yes. Okay, so what is the real? What's the real cost of challenging these powerful networks outside of the verbal threats? I'm looking at it both politically and personally, of course.
So politically, you become an enemy of the system. I mean, when this administration came, there was an MP who was involved, an MP who belongs to the ruling party, of course, who was involved in an illegal mining site. So this is a company, it's a legalized mining site, but the MP, using his party's influence and power and with the support of national security, went to drive out the owners of the site and took over. He claimed that the owners of the site did the same thing in 2018. So, I mean, we reported on this story and then it was hell. The kind of messages you receive through your social media account and so on was really, really, really serious. So we were told to tone down, not to go out there and so on. And then also, what was the second part of the question again?
Well, so you've been vocal about the need for stronger regional mechanisms to then hold illegal miners and their companies accountable. And you've also advocated for things like stronger digital whistleblowing. And you've talked about platforms, regional compliance databases and things like that. What would it take for a regional body like ECOWAS to enact real enforcement for mining regulations? You know, are there solutions for these databases, these stronger mechanisms that you talk about? Would ECOWAS be one who would be able to do this?
See, my sister, what's the name? Pardon me, what's the name?
Ndu.
You and I know that ECOWAS is toothless. On paper, ECOWAS is a strong body. But in terms of enforcement of the laws, we have enough laws. We don't need more laws.
Right.
What we need is enforcement. What we need is security service bearing their teeth to tackle the illegal mining menace across the sub-region. Unfortunately, we are not seeing it. ECOWAS is even struggling to enforce something as basic as movement of goods and services across borders in the sub-region. And you are talking about tackling bandits, armed terrorists who have taken over our natural resources in our forests. I think ECOWAS is simply not the body. It will take more than ECOWAS to do that, because ECOWAS does not have a standing force, right? It doesn't have a military that is able to come into the defense of its member states. It doesn't have a standing police force that can support law enforcement activities. So, in the scheme of things, ECOWAS is the last body I will come to. It should take the individual countries to say that it is time to root out illegal mining.
But what has worked in terms of saying that? What has worked in the past in terms of putting that public pressure? Has it been protests like Gen Z's, naming and shaming, which I don't think does much, especially when you have people called honorable? International sanctions, has that worked at all? Or do you have a specific tool that actually is a very effective strategy that you know of? You can say right now, this is what Seth's tool is that's going to tackle everything.
I think it should be more about the people mobilizing themselves.
Okay.
To insist that in our communities, we will not allow illegal mining. And there are communities that are rising and doing that. We published a story recently that the local chief, who was against illegal mining in the past, suddenly says, I think it is time to reach a consensus and ask the mining companies to give us social amenities and infrastructure that will better our lives and allow them to mine. The community says, no, we will not allow that. And they rose against the chief. And as we speak, mining is not happening in that community.
Okay.
So it will take local mobilization. You know what damage illegal mining can do to your community. If you are leaving it to the national level to do it, we know that our politicians even take money from illegal miners to finance their campaigns. They won't do it. It will take the local communities to mobilize and face the illegal mining menace. If we don't do it and leave it to government politicians to do it, no, they won't. because their stomachs depend on it, their lifestyles depend on it.
Okay.
All right. So after years of reporting on these issues, Seth, your passion for justice and change remains steadfast. You haven't changed in terms of how you've been doing this. Your work gives a voice to communities in terms of restoring hope and accountability, whose lands and lives have been destroyed. If you had an opportunity to address a Chinese ambassador directly, what would you say about China's mining operations in Africa?
I think I would want to talk to the Chinese ambassador to find a way of holding back the waves of Chinese migrants that are coming to our country to mine. They should sit down with our government to develop a strategy. To develop a strategy that would formalize the mining. I mean, it is very difficult to say don't mine because, I mean, if people are jobless, they certainly would have to mine. Particularly if they are seeing foreigners coming to their communities and taking away gold that can better their lives. They will certainly fight back and want to participate. So the best thing to do is for the Chinese government, the Chinese ambassador, to find a way of engaging our government. How do we mine in a way that we can formalize the mining so that we do it environmentally sustainable? That is the biggest threat, the environment. How do we do it sustainably? That will be my message to him. If he has Ghana at heart, if he has Africa at heart, he should be able to approach the Ghanaian administration and say, I want to help you do this. I want to help our people who are interested in mining and doing it illegally. I want to help you formalize your mining system in such a way that they won't destroy your environment. They will be more interested in protecting the environment than destroying it. Because as we speak, there are more trenches in our mining communities than there is a road, because the roads are even being destroyed.
So if the Chinese ambassador was to acquiesce to your requests, as it were, what would justice look like for the communities that have been affected by these mining practices? That's going to be our last question for this episode.
I think the first thing will be reparation for most of these communities.
Okay.
Most of these communities have lost farmland, have lost rivers, have lost sources of water, and so on. It will be very important to compensate them for the losses. Secondly, it will be very important to put in a plan that supports reclamation.
Okay.
Reclaiming the lands that have been destroyed. There are millions of hectares of land that have been destroyed that if we don't take care, as I mentioned earlier, we will be hungry in the near future. We'll begin to import more food than we are doing now.
Well, Seth, thanks for sharing with us. Thanks for talking to us about these things, because obviously it's a conversation that continues across the bands of time. But thank you for being on Panel 54 today to discuss these issues with us.
Thank you for having me.
All the best, Seth. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sure. Bye.
This conversation challenges us to look beyond foreign interests and local governance failures. It forces us to ask who is truly responsible for the plunder of West Africa's resources.
And while the stakes are high, Seth's work reminds us that there's still time to reverse course. Africa's wealth should benefit its people, not external exploiters.
This is about sovereignty, justice, and the power to protect Africa's future, not just its resources.
The real question we leave with today: can Africa reclaim its land and its future, or will it continue to be a pawn in the global game of extraction?
That's it for this episode of Panel 54, where we rethink the world one African perspective at a time. If today's conversation made you pause, reflect, or reframe, share it, start a conversation, and tag us in. Find us on our social media handle at Panel54Pod or your favorite streaming platforms. And don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss an episode.
Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and remember to keep the lens clear.